Hello, Year 7, and welcome to today's lesson. To start off with a knowledge retrieval task, this is linked to the work we were doing recently on different types of sentence. What I'd like to do is I'd like you to look at the three different kinds of sentence: simple, compound, and complex. I'd like you to describe what each of them are, and I'd like you to give an example of each. So what is a simple sentence, and give an example? What is a compound sentence, and give an example? What is a complex sentence, and give an example? This should take you about 3 minutes. Please pause this video, and then when you're ready to move on, once you've written your answers, take a look at my answers. And here are my answers. A simple sentence is a very basic sentence. It's an independent clause. It has a subject and a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. An example was, he was lost. He is the subject, lost is the verb, and he was lost. It's a complete thought. A compound sentence has two independent clauses that have related ideas. They can be joined by a conjunction, a coordinating conjunction, or by a semicolon. For example, he was lost, and that makes sense on its own. He could not find his way home. That makes sense on its own. You could put a full stop where that semicolon is, and that would still make sense. But then you would have two simple sentences. By using the semicolon, it becomes a compound sentence. We could replace that semicolon with and. We could replace that semicolon with for. We could replace that semicolon indeed with because, and it would still make sense. And that is a compound sentence. A complex sentence contains an independent clause, a sentence that stands alone, and a dependent clause which can't. The dependent clause needs the independent clause to make sense. In this case, he was lost beyond all help. He was lost, as we know, is a simple sentence in itself. It will work on its own. Beyond all help doesn't work as a sentence. It doesn't have a subject. The subject of beyond all help is he, but he is in the first part of that sentence. So that is a complex sentence, an independent clause or a simple sentence, and a dependent clause which doesn't make sense without the independent clause. Today's lesson is a piece of creative writing, and this is to do with using your imagination to create tension. And this is focused on our study of voyages. Over the last few lessons, we've looked at a series of tense pieces of writing. We've looked at a poem about a sea monster living beneath the waves. We've looked at extracts from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Captain Nemo on the Nautilus fighting devilfish. We've looked at an extract from Jaws, killer sharks stalking little boys. We are now going to think about how you can use language and structure to create tension. When we looked at Jaws, we talked about the various ways in which, in that case, the writer Peter Benchley used simple, complex, and compound sentences to create tension. Here are a few other ideas, simple sentences we talked about: foreshadowing, hinting what might happen to give the reader clues as to what kind of things might be going on. Now, if you've listened to Stone Cold, which is the class reader that we're doing, then you might have noticed there are already a couple of hints about things that might be happening in the story. The writer's already dropped in a bit of foreshadowing. choosing words with dark connotations. And we've done a lot of work so far on vocabulary and menacing words like abyss, perish, and so on and so forth. Ominous adjectives, descriptive words that create that sense of menace. Surprising narrative hooks, for example, Jaws giving us the point of view of the shark, the seaman being captured and eaten by the devilfish in Captain Nemo. A cliffhanger ending, leaving the audience at a point when they want to find out what's going to happen next. Rhetorical questions, questions that don't need answering, letting the audience, the reader, work it out, and varying your paragraph length, short paragraphs, long paragraphs, in the same way that you might vary the lengths of your sentences. Now, here's a challenge. Some of these are what we might call structural devices, and that is about how you organize your work. Some of them are language devices, which is to do with how you actually choose the words. Can you sort them out into two lists? Put one title, structure, and one title, language, and see if you can sort those out. Give yourself a few minutes, pause this video, and when you're ready, move on to the next slide. And here's how you organize them. So rhetorical questions, foreshadowing, choosing words, and ominous adjectives. They're all language devices because they're all to do with the kind of words and phrases that you choose when you're writing. Narrative hooks, cliffhanger endings, simple sentences, and paragraph length. They're all to do with structure. They're all to do with how you build your work, how you organize it. For example, if you were to imagine the metaphor of a house, the structural stuff would be the basic walls, floor, ceiling. That's where you get your house. The language stuff is how you decorate it. It's how you make it look. So you need the structure. You need to have sentences and paragraph lengths, and you might want a cliffhanger, and you might want a narrative hook. The language devices make it a lot more interesting and make it personal to you. Tick the ones you got right, correct the ones you got wrong with green pen, and then move on to the next task. I want you to imagine that you have been given, or you have just bought, an island for $5. And that is the starting point of your story. An island in the middle of the sea, surrounded by fog. And they sold it to you for $5. You're going to describe the experience of the character or the characters who bought the island. And that is going to take you the rest of this lesson. You're going to have about half an hour to write your story about the experience. So you need to think, first of all, about what the island looks like. Think about the fog. Think about what the island itself looks like rising out of the fog. Think about the sky. Think about how you got there. See if you can use some of the language devices that we've looked at over the course of this year. Simile, metaphor, pathetic fallacy. Give yourself about 5 minutes to write your first paragraph describing the experience of the character or the characters seeing that island. And now you're going to think about your story. I want you to think about how you're going to organize it. Think about how your story is going to work. How are you going to describe the approach to the island? How are you going to describe the characters on the island? Are you going to describe your characters leaving the island? What is going to happen to them? What are they going to experience? What is on the island? And how are you going to end your description? Are you going to leave it on a cliffhanger? Are you going to leave it with a clear resolution? What are you going to leave your reader feeling? I'd like you to think about that. If you want to jot some ideas down, you can do. If you want to plan your your story, spend about 5 minutes doing that now. When you're ready, move on. And that's pretty much all I want you to do in terms of planning. I want you to spend the rest of this lesson completing your creative writing. Now, some of you are absolutely incredible at creative writing, and I know that some of you are going to write 2 or 3 pages at least. Some of you might even want to add illustrations. You might want to add pictures. I'd like you to challenge yourself. Do try and use a range of sentence types. Think about how Peter Benchley used a range of simple, complex and compound sentences to build tension. Think about the work you did about being stalked or being a hunter or a prey. Think about the work that you did using similes and metaphors. Try and use all of those ideas to create something really exciting and interesting about your characters on this mysterious island. What do they find there? Try and vary the language and the structure that you use. Try and make it as interesting as possible for your characters on a mysterious island. When you've finished, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to reread your work. I want you to reread it, and I want you to color code it. Do it, keep it, bin it, build it. Now you don't need to color the bits that you want to keep. What I'd like you to do is highlight the bin it and the build it. The bin it are words and phrases that you think, well, my work would be better without that. And you might only have 2 or 3 of those. Build it, anything you think where you think, oh, well, that's good, but I can make it better. And you probably have 3 or 4 of those. And I'd like you to find at least 2 build it phrases that you can improve in green pen. Read back through your work, keep it, build it, bin it, green pen the bits that you think you could do better. When you've done that, what you need to do is photograph your work. You need to make sure that you upload your work to the Teams assignment. Please make sure it's attached. You then need to turn your work in, and that is it.